Westminster about all of this. Good morning to you, Norman. Two questions in one, I guess. Talk to us about the accusations of the Chancellor being premature in inviting these bids, and is there any disquiet at him openly courting Chinese firms when people are wondering about the possibility of British jobs?
Well, on the first, Anita, it may well be premature because, frankly, of the election of Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader, because in the past Mr Corbyn has opposed HS2, so has his shadow Chancellor John McDonnell. But perhaps the greater uncertainty about the political process comes from his pledge to nationalise the railways. And this morning Labour confirmed, yes, HS2 would be part of that process, it would be nationalised. Now, the question mark there is whether investors are going to be relaxed about that. I think that's absolutely fine. They don't have a problem with that. Or whether they're going to take fright and say, you know what, we'll just put our money elsewhere. So the politics of this are becoming an awful lot more complicated, added to which the Scottish National Party are not at all happy with the HS2 plans. Why? Because the line does not go to Scotland. It stops at Leeds and Manchester. So they too are unhappy. So the politics of this are getting increasingly fraught. In terms of China, Mr Osborne's view is China is the future and that the British economy has to hitch its wagon to the Chinese express. There's no point being lumbered with the stagnant Eurozone. We want a bit of the Chinese action, so much better to start building ties with China. But yes, there is criticism that Mr Osborne is showing favouritism towards the Chinese, and criticism from other figures like the Dalai Lama, who says that Mr Osborne and Mr Cameron are putting money above morality, given the Chinese government's record on human rights.
Norman, thank you very much. Pope Francis is to become the first leader of the Catholic Church to address both houses of the US Congress. His appearance will be the centrepiece of the third day of his official visit to the US, where he's been received with enthusiasm by Catholics and non-Catholics alike. On Wednesday, he canonized the country's first Hispanic saint and met President Obama at the White House. I'll be back at 11. Right now, it's the Victoria Derbyshire Show with Joanna Gosling.
Hello, it's Thursday, it's 9:15. I'm Joanna Gosling in for Victoria. Welcome to the programme. We reveal exclusive figures which show the extent of crime linked to schools in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's equivalent to 160 allegations per school day and has driven some staff to the edge of despair.
If it hadn't been for support, I think things would have been very different. I think I would have done something silly. I mean, I would have killed myself. That was what, I'd planned.
Also today, it's claimed the NHS is losing more than £5.5 billion a year because of fraud. We ask why and what's being done to stop it. Plus, later, the comedian David Walliams and his mission to make our youngsters the most literate in Europe. Hello, welcome to the programme. We're on BBC Two and the BBC News channel until 11 this morning. We'll keep you across the latest breaking and developing news as you'd expect, including news coming in from Eurotunnel in Calais that a teenager thought to have been between 15 and 17 years old has been found dead near the Channel Tunnel in the early hours of this morning. It's believed he was from East Africa. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. Also, at around 9:30, we'll bring you the latest number of homeless people from the government. The figure is expected to rise. Just after 10, we'll be taking a closer look at homelessness and ask how particularly vulnerable people should be given more help to find a place to live. Do get in touch. Your contributions are a really important part of the programme. Text will be charged at the standard network rate. And you can watch the programme online wherever you are via the BBC News app or the website bbc.co.uk/Victoria. And you can also subscribe to all our features on the News app by going to Add Topics and searching Victoria Derbyshire. First this morning, figures seen exclusively by this programme show that police investigated more than 30,000 crimes linked to schools last year across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. That is the equivalent of 160 crimes every school day. The figures, which were released under the Freedom of Information Act, shed new light on the extent of crimes in our schools and where they're taking place. In a moment, we hear from one teacher who was attacked in school. But first, Nicola Beckford has been taking a look at the numbers.
sexual assaults, violent crimes, criminal damage. Just some of the incidents investigated by police forces last year. Now, for the first time, this programme has put together a snapshot of the crimes that took place in and around schools across the country. 32 police forces across England, Wales and Northern Ireland provided us with data that we could analyse. We discovered that police investigated more than 30,000 crimes linked to schools last year. That's the equivalent of 160 crimes every school day. The largest number of crimes were recorded by the Metropolitan Police, Greater Manchester Police, across the West Midlands, the Thames Valley and in Northern Ireland. Some forces tell us that some of these crimes could have taken place outside of schools. Now, it's the first time that this information has been released on such a scale, so you can't make comparisons with previous years. So let me take you through the types of crimes that were reported. Our analysis suggests that 43% of alleged crime was for theft, burglary and robbery, and 14% of alleged crime was for arson or criminal damage. But what about violent crimes? In the past 18 months, this type of incident made the headlines twice. Spanish teacher Anne Maguire was stabbed to death in her classroom in Leeds. And Vincent Uzoma, who worked as a supply teacher in Bradford, described how he prayed for his life after he was stabbed by a pupil. So what did our data say about violence linked to schools? Well, more than a third of alleged incidents were for violent crimes. The police investigated more than 9,000 violent offences last year. Some forces gave details about the actual crimes as opposed to just stating a crime category. The descriptions were alarming and included threats to kill, common assault and grievous bodily harm. So what's being done to improve safety in schools? Well, some police officers and PCSOs are actually based on site in schools or work with a cluster of schools as part of the Safer Schools partnership. But with budgets tight, many schools and forces are cutting back on their in-school provision. So the question is, what impact will that have on safety?
Well, Nicola went to meet one former teacher who was attacked by a pupil at a school in Cheshire. Ian Corcoran was unable to work again due to ill health after one of his pupils assaulted him in the school playground. You may find some of what he's got to say upsetting.
It started as, I suppose you'd call it low level, with the verbal abuse, pushing, shoving, the odd thump on the chest. But it started seriously for me when a youngster basically threatened me with a hammer. I had to wrestle the hammer away from him, and eventually, when I got myself together, get out into the corridor and summon assistance. From that, there were a couple of other incidents which followed, which involved the same character spitting at me and again thumping me on the chest. But the final incident, which meant I felt I had to leave the school, was on yard duty, where the character pinned me against a wall, held me by the throat, and I struggled to try and get his grip away from my windpipe. It was only with the intervention of another member of staff who happened to be passing that I actually managed to break free. And that was my last day.
So that first incident with the hammer,
yeah.
Can you tell me about what happened then?
Yeah, it was the start of a lesson. This youngster had obviously had some issues at break time. He came into the lesson and we hadn't even started the lesson. He went to the tool cupboard, he picked up a hammer and came across and was threatening me. A lot of shouting, a lot of verbal abuse, and he swung the hammer down and I grabbed it with both hands. He held on, we struggled, and I eventually got hold of the hammer, held it low, and when he backed off, I went for the door. I burst into tears in front of the staff there. Ended up in the staff room for 30, 40 minutes or so, just totally broken down.
So how did this take a toll on you personally?
It was frightening because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was round the corner. It became more and more worrying. I will admit I was in fear of coming across this character, because on many occasions I would be on my own on, say, duty somewhere. Yeah, it was a horrible place to be at that time.
To have to leave teaching under these circumstances, that must have been really hard.
Yeah, and it still hurts. There's no getting away from it. It's changed my life. Before all this, I loved the teaching, I had the patience of a saint. I always had time for people. My tolerance levels were way up there. Now I find myself in certain instances I can lose my rag quickly. If it hadn't been for the support of the professional services around, and my wife and my family, I wouldn't have come through this. But if it hadn't been for support, I think things would have been very different. I think I would have done something silly. I mean, I would have killed myself. That was what, I'd planned. Yeah.
Had you thought about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd gone through it and thought of all the, the possible ways of doing it. And it was only when I started talking to, first of all, my GP and then counsellors and that, obviously it wasn't an answer because of the mess I would have left with my family. And that's what saw me through it.
Well, if you're worried about anything Ian has said, you can find links on where to get help and support on our website, bbc.co.uk/Victoria. We spoke to the Education Authority that employed Ian for its response. Gerald Meehan, Strategic Director of Children and Families for Cheshire West and Cheshire Council, said in a statement, "We were only contacted by the show hours before the programme was broadcast to respond to a case which happened 7 years ago. Unfortunately, we have not been able to check our files in this time as they are kept off-site." The head teacher of the school in question is adamant that all correct procedures were followed at the time. "We take matters of this kind extremely seriously and we have robust procedures in place to deal with allegations quickly and thoroughly. Fortunately, cases such as this occurring in our schools are extremely rare." And a government spokesman has said crime and violent behaviour have no place in our schools. "We have put teachers back in charge of the classroom. They can search pupils without consent, confiscate prohibited items and use reasonable force to remove disruptive pupils from the classroom when necessary. We also have given heads the final say on expulsions. Our statutory guidance is crystal clear that anyone who has concerns about a pupil's welfare should refer them to their council or the police if a crime has been committed. Head teachers are best placed to decide the right approach for their pupils if incidents occur, and we know many good schools already work with the police and other organisations to educate pupils and protect them from harm and involvement in crime. It is very rare for police to be called to schools," the statement goes on to say. Well, later we'll be asking how the police and teachers are working together to reduce crime linked to schools, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, so do get in touch. 61124, the number for your texts, and hashtag Victoria Live for Twitter. Now let's just bring you some breaking news that we're getting on the annual Mecca pilgrimage. We're just getting reports that at least 100 pilgrims have been killed in a crush just outside the Muslim holy city of Mecca, where 2 million people are taking part in the annual Hajj pilgrimage. We're just showing you the latest pictures that we have. This information on the crush, though, being reported by state television in Saudi Arabia, and it's also saying that up to 400 people have been injured in the incident. So we'll keep you updated on that as we get any more. Thank you for joining us today. Still to come, how billions of pounds is being drained out of the NHS every year, apparently, by fraudsters. And the Chancellor in China inviting companies there to bid for work building the proposed high-speed rail link HS2. First, 9:27, let's bring you right up to date with the main news this morning. The police have investigated more than 30,000 crimes linked to schools last year across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, according to figures seen exclusively by this programme. It's the equivalent of 160 crimes every school day. The NHS in England may be losing more than £5.5 billion every year as a result of fraud. A new report written by a former anti-fraud chief at the Department of Health says action must be taken at a time when money is tight. One of Britain's biggest steel plants is on the verge of calling in the administrators, putting 2,000 jobs at risk. Production at the SSI factory in Redcar was stopped earlier this week. UK Steel says rising competition and falling prices are damaging firms. Saudi Arabia's state television is reporting that at least 100 people have been killed and 390 injured in a crush during Hajj outside the Muslim holy city of Mecca, where 2 million people are joining in the annual pilgrimage. EU leaders have agreed to spend more money to help refugees in the countries surrounding Syria. At an emergency meeting in Brussels, European Union ministers pledged €1 billion in aid, with a promise to put an end to the chaos at Europe's borders. French officials say a teenager, thought to have been between 15 and 17 years old, was killed near the Channel Tunnel in the early hours of this morning. It's believed he was from East Africa. The Chancellor George Osborne, who's visiting China, is inviting companies there to bid for work building the proposed high-speed 2 rail link between London, Birmingham and cities in the north of England. The contracts are worth £12 billion. Right, let's catch up with all the sport. Hugh has the details. What have you got for us this morning, Hugh?
Hi, good morning, Joanna. There's lots to talk about in sport today, but we'll start with Formula One because it returns to the Suzuka course in Japan this weekend, 1 year on from the accident that ultimately cost Jules Bianchi his life. The 25-year-old French driver suffered severe head injuries when he skidded off the track, and in July of this year, his family finally decided the time was right to end his suffering. His father, Philippe Bianchi, has told us he still feels his son is with him, but he's also told the BBC he still finds it too difficult to even watch Formula One. You can hear his words just after 10 o'clock. Elsewhere, there was more League Cup action in England and Scotland last night, and a big shock as Championship side Sheffield Wednesday beat Newcastle United, who are also 19th in the Premier League, so it's not good times for them. I'll be speaking to our senior football reporter Ian Dennis about the impending crisis in the North East. And boxer Tyson Fury has the fight of his career coming up against heavyweight champion of the world, the imperious Vitaly Klitschko. But he sought inspiration not from a former boxer or a sports Svengali. No, he's decided Batman's the person who can save the sport. Extremely funny pictures coming up, not to be missed, just after 10 o'clock. I'll see you then.
Look forward to seeing them. Thanks a lot, Hugh. Fraudsters are cheating the NHS out of billions of pounds every year, according to a new report by the accountancy consultancy PFK and Portsmouth University. They say patients and NHS staff, including GPs and dentists, are ripping off the health service by as much as £5.7 billion a year, which is 5% of the annual budget. The Department of Health has criticised the report, calling it highly speculative. The numbers in the report, though, are staggering. GPs are accused of £348 million of fraud every year, according to the report's authors, even creating so-called ghost patients to charge the NHS for treating people who don't exist. Dentists could be defrauding the NHS by up to £137 million annually. And patients are apparently claiming £304 million worth of free prescriptions, eye tests and dental work, which they're not entitled to. Well, with me in the studio now, we're going to be talking more about the case of one whistleblower who was caught up in a case, Shamila Chowdhury. Shamila, welcome. You were concerned about what you believe to be going on in your hospital. Tell us why you decided to blow the whistle.
Basically, I was the budget holder and I was responsible for the attendance of all staff. And I noticed that my consultants were moonlighting and they weren't there in the department when they were supposed to. And it transpired that they were doing this every week. So basically, the patients weren't getting the treatment that they should do. Plus, NHS was wasting money on consultants who weren't there. So they were actually going to a private hospital being paid for the work that NHS was also paying.
Now, no case was ever brought against these consultants,
No.
but you felt you wanted to draw attention to something that you believed to be an issue.
Yes.
Why did you feel so strongly about it?
Well, first of all, this is public money, which was being wasted. This money should have been spent on patient care, and it was vast sum of money. Also, I was the budget holder, so it was my responsibility to report it. If I signed their attendance record to say they were there and they weren't, I myself would be committing fraud. So it was important.
So when you raised your concerns, what happened?
It got escalated up the management chain. Everyone agreed there was a problem, but nobody would tackle it. Eventually, months later, well, 2-3 months later, false counter-allegation was made against me. And no one even checked to see if it was accurate or there was any evidence. They marched me out of the premises. They escorted me out of the building, in front of all my staff. I managed 60 staff in the department. I was suspended, dismissed, even though there was no evidence against me. I finally took the case to interim court hearing, and I won that. The court found that I had been dismissed unfairly, and it was a direct result of whistleblowing. The trust refused to have me back. I then did an appeal procedure, which I also won. But at this stage, the trust said the post was no longer there, so they said it was redundant. So in the end, I was offered redundancy, which was 2 years' pay. Out of that, I had to pay legal fees. My legal fees had escalated to 130,000. Out of that, I had to pay about 78,500 for my settlement, which is only 2 years' pay. So I was not left with very much. I couldn't get another job. I was offered a job, and then as soon as they found I was a whistleblower, they withdrew the post. I've had interviews cancelled. I now have breast and lung cancer, which numerous consultants think is because of direct result of whistleblowing, the stress of it. I may actually lose my home because no income. In fact, although I am working on a temporary basis, the work actually runs out in 6 weeks, and it's not the payment that I was receiving, it's not even the job that I was doing. So my whole career has been destroyed. So I am actually looking at losing my home in very near future with cancer.
Do you wish you had just kept quiet?
No, not once. I may have done things differently. I should have probably looked for another job before you... But you do what you think is right at the time, and you have to do what's right at the time. I don't regret ever blowing the whistle. You have a duty. Once you work in the NHS, you have a duty of care, and you have to abide by that. But the system has failed, really, in protecting me as a whistleblower, as well as not investigating any of my concerns.
The message from the government and elsewhere within the NHS is that whistleblowers absolutely should come forward. It's the right thing to do.
They should come forward, but then on the back of it, they should also be protected. During my case, it's 6 years now, I have been in touch with the Treasury. George Osborne knew about it. Jeremy Hunt knew about it. David Cameron knew about it. Simon Stevens knew about it. David Pryor. So all the senior people, some of whom I've actually met as a one-to-one basis, Sir Robert Francis, as part of the whistleblowing review, knew about it. So they all knew about my case. So none of them have intervened to look at my concerns and intervene or investigate, even though I had all the evidence. No one had intervened to actually protect me as a whistleblower, and I'm now left with my career demolished. I may actually lose my home. My health is not in a good place. So,
how important is it within the NHS that people come forward to raise concerns where they have them? We've got these figures today on the apparent scale of fraud within the NHS.
Yes.
How easy is it potentially for fraud to be covered up if it's not called up?
Very easy to be
whistleblowers?
covered up, because all that happens is no one takes action. There is no accountability in the NHS. And unless there is accountability of individuals and senior managers, nothing will change. And currently there is no accountability. Even when it's gone to a higher authority within the NHS, nothing has happened. So unless that changes and there's accountability, and there needs to be an effective independent body who investigate these concerns. There also needs to be an independent body who protect whistleblowers. Whistleblowers should not be left financially in a destitute position where they're homeless, jobless, because they have actually done what was right. And these are the very people the NHS should be fighting to keep and supporting them, and it's not happening. And unfortunately, as these cases appear, it actually raises alarm bells to other whistleblowers not to raise concerns. So even though you say you've got duty of care to staff, they only look at not very far and they see what happens, because not only do the concerns themselves don't get looked into, you yourself destroy your whole livelihood, your career, your health. You lose everything.
Shamila Chowdhury, thank you very much for coming in and telling us your story. Get in touch if you've got thoughts on this. 61124, the number for your texts. Coming up, a man confined to a wheelchair 5 years ago, now able to walk again after scientists reconnected his brain to his legs with some pretty amazing technology. We'll have the story. First, though, Saudi Arabia's state television is reporting that at least 150 people have been killed and nearly 400 injured in a crash during Hajj outside the Muslim holy city of Mecca. The BBC Arabic's Yusuf Taha is here with us now. What can you tell us, Yusuf? It sounds pretty horrendous.
Well, it's been a crash kind of stampede because now the pilgrims have been to Mount Arafat yesterday, and then they descend to Muzdalifah, where they collect small pebbles, stones, to throw at the devil's symbol. And if you look at the screen, there was this pillar in the middle. So people go there and they gather around and they're supposed to throw these little pebbles. But some people think, you know, it's all a symbolic act, but some people think they need to throw the stones as hard as they can, and that way they can hurt Satan himself directly. And also, while the instructions are small pebbles, some people think if they get big bricks and throw them at that pillar, it's more effective. And that's where the stampede happens and the crash. People always push themselves. I was there a couple of times, and I was actually hit in the head by some of these stones and also people pushing and shoving. So today we have now, so far, 150 dead and 400 at least injured. And I think that this toll is expected to rise. The emergency services are there trying to rescue people, trying to take people to local hospitals for treatment.
And as you mentioned, it is not the first time there has been a crash.
Absolutely not. It's happened all over the years. And no matter what the authorities do to alleviate that, because that place, you know, where these stones are thrown for 3 days, there's that pillar in the middle, and people think they have to come very close. And because it's a small place, they keep pushing and shoving. So they push those people at the front are usually quite well squeezed in the act, and many of them get injured, if not killed.
How important is it for Muslims to take part in this pilgrimage?
That's crucial. It's a very essential part. It's one of the main components of the rites of Hajj. So it has to be performed over 3 days, where they have to throw these stones, and then they go back to Mecca, where they do the farewell circling of the Kaaba, the black box in the middle. They do that 7 times, and then they can complete the rites of the Hajj itself.
Huge numbers joining in, 2 million this year are there. Has anything been done to try to improve safety?
The Saudi authorities have, over the years, been trying their best, I think, at spending billions and billions of dollars to improve safety and improve facilities. For example, there was always a problem with transport from one place to another where the rites have to be performed. So the Saudis, for example, these tunnels in the mountain there, and they installed some light railway service to speed up the transfer of people from one place to another safely. However, when you have people coming from all over the world, these great numbers, actually this year it's around 2 million. In previous years, we have to have about 3 million. But when that became quite difficult, many people were injured. The Saudis have introduced restrictions on the number from each country to reduce the numbers of those coming. But of course, they can't reduce them drastically to, let's say, 500,000 or more so, because people want to perform the Hajj, which is an essential part of Islam for those who can afford it, in wealth and health as well.
So these scenes of the crush will not put people off joining in?
No, I don't think so. There is 1.5 billion Muslims around the world who it is their duty to perform Hajj at least once in their life if they can afford it, you know. So people will keep coming. And yes, there are accidents. Some people also believe that those who die while performing Hajj in the holy sites, they die as sort of sinless, if you like, and go to heaven. So I don't think that will put people off.
Thank you very much. We'll keep you updated as we get any more on what is happening with the pilgrimage as well. Now, though, it's full steam ahead for the High Speed 2 rail project in China, where the Chancellor George Osborne is trying to court some of the country's biggest investors to pitch for contracts to build the line. Well, let's get more from our political guru, Norman Smith. Norman, why has he launched the bidding process for HS2 in China?
Well, because he's hoping the Chinese will have the money and the construction firms to build what is going to be the biggest building project in the whole of Europe. We're talking about a £50 billion line starting in London, going up first of all to Birmingham, then splitting with one line going to Manchester and the other up to Leeds. But, although the Chancellor may think it's full steam ahead, there could yet be trouble. Why? Because Jeremy Corbyn, Mr. Corbyn and his shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, they voted against HS2 in the past. In fact, only last month, Mr. Corbyn said this about HS2. He said HS2 is a project that will turn our great regional cities into dormitories for London businesses. He's not at all keen on it. And the question mark is whether he will now tell Labour MPs, well, actually, we're going to oppose it. But there's another thing which could cause Mr. Osborne problems. Jeremy Corbyn has also said he wants to nationalise the railways, and later confirmed today HS2 would be nationalised. Now, the question mark there is, will investors, Chinese investors, other investors, get cold feet if they think they're going to be ploughing money into a project which at the end of the day is going to be nationalised? So there are pretty big question marks this morning, I think, about the politics around HS2.
And what about the arguments for and against getting foreign investors involved anyway in big infrastructure projects in Britain? Well,
the truth is George Osborne is on a mission in China, not just to get funding for HS2. This is a concerted attempt to woo the Chinese. He's sort of gone there as sort of a political Romeo to kind of woo Chinese investors to pour money into it. So just look at the sort of George Osborne Chinese charm offensive we've had over the past couple of days. He's promised £24 billion worth of projects for the Northern Powerhouse, which he says Chinese companies can bid for. He's also promised a £2 billion guarantee to the Chinese that if they press ahead with Hinkley Point nuclear power station, he'll guarantee them £2 billion worth of funding on that. He's also set aside another £10 million, which is going to go towards Mandarin lessons in British schools, and £7 million for a sort of roadshow by British cultural institutions like the Globe, like the Royal Opera House, touring China. All that, if you like, to kind of pitch Britain in China, because he thinks that we need to think about hitching ourselves, if you like, to the Chinese Express. We don't want to be lumbered with a sort of stagnating Eurozone economy. We need to build much closer ties with China.
How is the Chinese charm offensive going down?
Well, the problem, you will not be surprised to know, is human rights. There are many people who are decidedly queasy about basically George Osborne going on bended knee in front of the Chinese saying, please, please, please invest. In fact, we heard from the Dalai Lama, who did a series of interviews just the other day. in which he accused Mr. Cameron of putting money before morality. Now, you're probably aware that initially when he became Prime Minister, David Cameron appeared sympathetic to the Dalai Lama. He's now pulled back from that and has had no real further contact with Dalai Lama, and instead you get the sense the government is really pressing hard to build better relations with China, even though many people are critical of its human rights records.
Thanks a lot, Norman. Now, an amazing story about a man completely paralysed from the waist down who has become the first paraplegic patient to be able to walk using brain power. The 26-year-old American was confined to a wheelchair 5 years ago after suffering a spinal cord injury. But following a neural bypass procedure and 19 weeks of training, the American was able to walk along a 12-foot course by using a new device to send messages from his brain to his legs, bypassing his spine. We can speak to Professor Zoran Nenadic from the University of California, Irvine, which took part in the research. Thank you very much for joining us. Extraordinary breakthrough here. Just explain how it worked.
Thank you for having me. In a sense, what we have done here is we measured the electrical activity from this person's brain, who has been paralyzed for a number of years, and we managed to code his brain waves using the algorithm that can tell apart whether the person wants to walk or doesn't want to walk. So it is a simple device in that sense, but it works fairly robustly and can with great certainty predict what the user's intentions are and appropriately deliver stimulus to his legs by means of electrical stimulation signals through a pair of electrodes mounted muscles. So in a sense, when the subject wants to walk, his legs slightly pull and make steps for him, and when he doesn't want to walk, the stimulation ceases and he will stand in place.
So how much of a breakthrough is this?
This is the first time, to our knowledge, that brain-computer interface, which is not a new technology, by the way, has been connected with lower extremities in such a way to allow a subject to make steps in a so-called free overground walking manner. Previous studies have done movement in virtual reality environment, and our group has done some work there too. And using robotic gait orthosis, those are essentially robotics legs suspended over a treadmill. And again, our group has been involved in a similar study. This is the first time that the subject was actually able to use his brainwaves to push steps and traverse the course.
Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Nenadic. Unfortunately, the sound to you wasn't brilliant, but absolutely fascinating to hear the work that you've been involved with there. Now, European Union leaders have pledged to spend €1 billion, around £700 million, to help aid agencies dealing with refugees fleeing the war in Syria. They've also agreed a quota system to relocate 120,000 refugees among EU countries, a scheme the UK is not a part of. But speaking this morning, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel called the summit agreement only a first step and said a more durable solution was needed. Our reporter Anna Holligan has been to one of the new transit camps on the Serbia-Croatia border. In the early hours of this morning, she met some of the refugees and migrants and the British volunteers working through the night to help them.
Normally the television cameras disappear after dark, but the refugee crisis doesn't stop. So tonight we've come to this camp on the Serbia-Croatia border, and already more than 44,000 people have passed into Croatia since last week. Thousands more are arriving every day. This is a British volunteer who's helped the translations, hot chocolate and kind words. It's relatively controlled now, and the role we're playing, providing information and translations, that's something that's often absent.
That's the problem, is communication. You put it in one thing, in language, people understand it in a different way. Tension rises in the Arabs, so Syrian, Iraqi, so it's key. My dad had to Iraq, so he fled again numerous countries. One situation where, as of course they are now, you have people here walking 18 kilometers in the middle of the night, pitch black, freezing, literally freezing. I was wearing 3 jumpers and it was very cold. Blankets scarce, food scarce, water. I mean, you can see the conditions, the toilets. Really horrible. This is probably one of the most organised camps you can see. A lot of them engineers, doctors, they're not just any they can have that's from the streets coming into these countries. Very educated people, but it's going to show how bad it is back home that they're willing to sacrifice so much and go through so much difficulties just to try and escape that hell which they describe. They're drowning in the seas, walking these freezing nights. I mean, women, children. No one wants to put his family forward for what? A bit of income support, benefits. No one wants just escaping the ISIS or these militants that are killing all these people. They're not coming here for money. Just that security that they're looking for.
And another bus. The thing about these trans camps is that there is a constant transition of people. As more and more are arriving, others are leaving.
It's 1,500 miles. We just got here just now.
The British aid convoy has just arrived. People from England and look at the...
Even shoes, footwear, blankets, sleeping bags, chocolates, kids, especially kids. Temperature very quick. So you give it up, you can, you know, and as you see stuff, you like rags just to show that, you know, you're gonna make the effort purchasing some of them. You know, you don't give what you take yourself. That's what we've done.
And
tea bags, you got saviours.
You've got some
We've even got
very British aid here.
Start handing some water out now, yeah?
Cornflakes.
It's what we would have at home.
So whether it's the Brits sharing their tea and biscuits or Germans offering vegetable soup, somewhere among police and the refugees you'll find volunteers who cross borders to help those who are trying to do the same.
Let's just bring you right up to date with our breaking news this morning. At least 150 Muslim worshippers have been killed in an annual Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. We're showing the latest pics that we have. Several hundred more have been injured. Saudi officials say that in Mina, near the holy city of Mecca, more than 2 million Muslims from around the world taking part in the Hajj. The start of this year's event was overshadowed by a lack of rain earlier this month onto the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Islam's holiest site. We'll keep updated as we get more on that. Also, the staggeringly high number of crimes linked to schools in England and Northern Ireland. We will bring you the figures, and we'd love to on that this morning, so get in touch. 61124 number for 10 hashtag or now going to find out how the weather's looking, because there are improvements in Strand.
I mean, Joanna, you strike me as a glass half full kind of person. Do you like the seasons?
I can't really monitor the seasons at the moment because they're so changeable. They're in one,
I know, but I had a bit of a sense of humour failure when I came into work this morning, because we've had some marks. I found some conkers when I was out walking the dog yesterday, and I had to have the central tissue on. So I'm not a very happy bunny. So I thought I'd try and take a look at where we've got warmth. Still many people thinking about heading off in search of some sunshine. But do you like photographs about it? True, is it?
Well, as long as you're getting elsewhere, probably.
We've got some storms to point out. This massive cloud has brought some awesome southern Italy, Greece and into Turkey. Actually, it's brought some flooding. So anybody linked to the Mediterranean, it can always be a bit of a lottery at this time of year. You can get some storms, but there's some in there. But best of the sunshine that I can find at the moment is through the Western Mediterranean. So if you've got friends and family who are going towards Turkey or Greece, they can pick up some showers, but it's not too bad. Visited the Vatican, 28 degrees in Rome. Wow. Very nice indeed as well, of course. Sardinia, across the south of France, and in Spain and Portugal. Very reliable.
Southern Spain.
Very nice. That would be we've got at school.
I was going to say, sadly, we're not going anywhere near there, so what can we look forward to?
Well, it's a distant memory, but there is some good news for you. I dear, because actually, closer to home, we've got some decent weather in the forecast, and it's all due to the jet stream, as we like to tell you about. But the stream I'm seeing up into the north and west of the UK is driven far moving in higher atmosphere, and when the jet stream is into the north of the UK, it's still driving force of pushing these low pressure systems coming in from the Atlantic over. Basically, it's going to allow high pressure to build, and that basically means we're heading for steady weather, not this weekend actually, into next week as well. So bear that in mind. For now, though, we do have some showers to clear through for spells and heavy downpours to catch out today, particularly northwest. You might be unlucky to see some rumbles of thunder mixed in there. So frequent showers and some pretty blustery in the south and west. Across England and Wales, the showers should be few and far between here. And hope with some sunshine, it'll be reasonably pleasant out there. Despite of sharp thundering across and rather breezy, so feeling disappointing. 11-12 degrees. Showers in Scotland should see some drier, brighter weather. And for England, where few isolated showers, light winds, hopefully with more sunshine coming in and in picture, and likely into mid-high teens in north question. Through the night tonight, we start seeing those showers in intensity. Still the winds a feature, and still a few showers clinging onto the far north of Scotland, but else under the skies in rural parts, which is perhaps mid-single figures, but holding up just into double figures in towns and city centres. So we start off tomorrow then on a quiet theme. Across England and Wales, dry, chilly note, the sunshine getting to work, feeling quite pleasant, and the showers fairly isolated by tomorrow afternoon in the far north of Scotland, but a little breezier. Temperatures, similar values to today, so in the sunshine, in 18 or 19 is still pleasant enough, and that's how we pass into the weekend. One thing bearing in mind though is autumn. Chilly nights could lead to this, particularly on Sunday morning, but hopefully a window of finer for the middle of the day. Get out and enjoy it if you can. If you just want more detail, for plenty of sunny spells on offer into the weekend. Enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Joanna Victoria. Welcome to the programme if you've just joined us. Coming up before 11, figures. The police have investigated more than 30,000 crimes linked to schools last year in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's driving some staff to the edge.
If it hadn't been for stores, I think I would have done things. I would have killed myself. That's what's in my plan.
We'll be talking more about that in just a moment. 220 people died in a crash at the in Mecca. We'll keep you across latest as this develops through the morning. This on the rise is how one young victim went to her council for help but was given leaflets and advice on how to get benefits. And try to make it a little more moderate. The comedian David Walliams makes it his mission. We'll from him later in the programme. First, it's 10 o'clock. News. The police have investigated more than 30,000 crimes linked to schools across England, Wales and Northern Ireland last year, according to figures exhibited by the Rome. It's the equivalent of 160 crimes every school day. Saudi Arabia's state television is reporting that at least 220 people have been killed and nearly 400 injured in a crash during Hajj, Muslim holy Mecca, where 2 million people are performing the annual pilgrimage. New reports Ford could be visiting the NHS in England nearly 6 billion a year. The view says there is an urgent need to tackle the issue because of financial shortages in the health service. Shamila Chowdhury was sacked after blowing the whistle on Ford. She says it's very easy for fraud to be cut up in the NHS.
Unless it's accountability of individuals and senior managers, nothing will change, and really there is no accountability. Even when it's gone to a higher authority within the NHS, nothing has happened. So unless that changes and the accountability, and there needs to be an effective independent body who investigates these concerns.
It's one of Britain's biggest ailments, on the verge of calling in the administrators, putting 2,000 jobs at risk. Production of SSI plant in Redcar was stopped earlier this week. Trade body is calling urgent government help. EU leaders have agreed to spend more money to help refugees in the countries surrounding Syria. At an emergency meeting in Brussels, European ministers pledged €1 billion in aid, with a promise to put an end to the chaos at Europe's borders. A boy believed to have been 13-year-old being killed near the French entrance to the Channel Tunnel. He was hit by a train and this morning. It's thought he was from East Africa. The Chancellor George Osborne, who's visiting China, is inviting companies there to bid for work building a rail link between London, Birmingham and cities in the north of England. The contracts were £12 billion. Right, let's catch up with all the sport now and join you. Promised us a treat with some great pictures.
Yeah, cut we're going to hear from Tyson Fury, some very strange bit at the end, but Formula One, because the father of former driver Jules Bianchi says it's still super for him to watch the sport. Formula Suzuka in Japan this weekend. The course will sustain the severe head injuries that led to his death of the 25-year-old back in a year on from the accident. Philippe Bianchi told BBC Sports editor Dan Burrow this week would be a difficult moment for his family.
Perhaps we can see a game, Grand Prix, I don't know what for. And I think that for all the community, all the people can crash of last year, and it's difficult. And he made Grand Prix and all the time, every day, from me, from to my mother, every day. And I can't speak with Jules, and his mother can't speak with him, and that's difficult.
The small League Cup action. Arsenal beat Spurs in the North London derby. When Manchester United got the season, and the surprises of night came on Tyneside. Newcastle United. It was the fourth defeat in football. Ian Dennis was at St James's Park and joins us. After Derby County, Steve McLaren would have been hoping for a good start with his new club. But what's how so far, has it?
No, I mean, speaking of McLaren, he will take care of it in view, but the players take responsibility to see. They shirked the challenge last night. Tovan arrived again and it took it. He wasn't as sharp on the field, he was sloppy. Symptomatic aware of the challenge. It's a huge task to change the mentality within the club. With City at home and Manchester City away, it might get worse before it can get better.
If you're a Newcastle family, seeing them down in 19th in the Premier League, it's too early to call it a crisis?
Well, Steve McLaren is almost nice, but Newcastle United as a club appear in recent seasons always from a crisis. The thought to be fair this season been an excellent last night was one to endure. Steve McLaren is on because he's witnessed two very poor displays at home, and the minimum he will expect on Saturday is a bit of fight, spirit and passion to be shown against Chelsea.
OK, Ian, thanks very much for joining us. So, with the much-awaited film Superman coming up next year, I've been thinking, who would win in a fight, Batman or Superman? It's got Superman, right? He's an alien, Batman. He's just a regular person. He's probably losing for the world heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko. Wouldn't he? Well, Britain's Tyson Fury, he thinks he burst into their press conference yesterday, dressed as the Caped Crusader, and promised to entertain the fans whilst retiring the 39-year-old Klitschko from the sport by winning their fight on October 24th. Safe to say, with Nassim wide Fury on talking so much. Well, put it simply, Klitschko is boring. Find if he truly is that far, won't we? But I'll get that instead of 10:30, Joanna.
Well, he'll have to dress up as Superman next time he appears, won't he?
Yeah.
Thanks, Hugh. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Welcome to the programme which is joining on BBC Two and BBC News Channel until 11 this morning. Across the breaking news coming from Mecca throughout the morning, where it's believed at least 220 people have been killed and more than 400 injured during the Hajj pilgrimage. Do then throughout morning, texts will charge at standard network rate. And you can watch the programme online wherever you are via the BBC News app or on the website bbc.uk/Victoria. You can also subscribe to all our features on the app by going to topics and searching Victoria Derbyshire. Right, let's go back to the breaking news this morning. At least 220 Muslim worshippers being killed in a stampede at the annual Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. Several hundred more have been injured. These the latest pictures that we have of the pilgrimage. Saudi officials saying the crush happened in Mina, near Mecca. More than 2 million Muslims from around the world are taking part in the Hajj. The start of this year was overshadowed by the prayer this month to the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Islam's holiest site. The latest pictures we have of pilgrims taking part in the annual pilgrimage, more than 2 million in the pilgrimage, a pilgrimage that all Muslims are expected to participate in at least once in their life to their health and wealth to do so. It is a pilgrimage that has been in previous years, and today we are hearing news that at least 220 people have been killed in a stampede outside Mecca, and latest figures are numbers of people injured. 450. So that happened in Mina, which is on the outskirts of the holy city of Mecca. And the pictures of stone throwing, which is part of the annual pilgrimage. Well, we are to get the very latest from Mecca. We will keep you updated as we hear any more. Now, those exclusive figures, realised programme which showed the true extent of crime in our schools. 160 incidents linked to schools across England, Wales and Northern Ireland were recorded every school day last year. Auditing figures sentenced by 32 police forces are neglected is here. Figures have been collected before, Nicholas. Just tell us what you've gleaned.
Exactly, you're absolutely right, Joe. It is the first time that we've been able to see information on this scale, certainly. And what we discovered was more than 30,000 crime-linked calls were recorded last year. And as you said, that's the equivalent, when you get down, to 160 crimes every school day. Now, to find out where these crimes were actually taking place, we had a look at the different information the forces sent us, and in terms of the highest number of recorded incidents, that came from Metropolitan Police, followed then by Greater Manchester Police, West Midlands Police, Thames Valley Police, and then across Northern Ireland. And quite a wide spread of information there. Now, some of these crimes, police told us, could have been committed by pupils, some could have been committed by adults. In some cases, they said it was possible that some of these crimes may have taken place at school. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to publish that information so that you're able to look up, see where these alleged crimes are actually taking place.
And tell us more about the breakdown of what sort of crimes you're talking about. Okay,
so we really wanted to put this into categories because we had, like I said, 30,000 different bits of information. So we went through each crime. We worked out that 43% alleged crimes for theft, burglary, and robbery. 14% of the crimes were for arson or criminal damage, and 2% of these crimes were for violent crimes. And when you actually read some of the evidence that took place, they were quite worrying, and they included like threats to kill, common assault and battery, GBH. Now, obviously, last year, violence against teachers has the past 18 months. There was the tragedy of Annie and Wire, who was killed in a classroom in Leeds. And recently was the case of Vincent Uzoma, who was stabbed in his classroom in Linford.
Was it indeed people talk about what can go on here?
It was actually very, very difficult. The teachers that I spoke to who didn't want to come on air, they're basically saying that, you know, teachers don't really want to talk about these crimes because they're concerned that they will be perceived as being weak, or, you know, basically afraid of losing their jobs if the word costly. So into getting full speed was really
Thank you, Nicola. Well, we can talk a bit more about it right now. Joined by Superintendent Lawrence Taylor, who is the police lead for children and young people in Melville, and also John Fee, who is a former CEO of Business Community Learning, which runs 47 academies across the country. John, first of all, your organisation oversees 47 academies. What do you make of figures like this?
I think the biggest. I think that a crime in a school, I think it's an important issue. But I think for us, if you're thinking across the country, there are 25,000 all across the country. So that normally equates to about 2 crimes in a school over a period of a year. For Oasis, we serve 25 students, and we specialise in working in vulnerable communities. And we feel our job is to be as inclusive as possible, always make sure that we treat the children with tough love, and that we create a culture of safety within every one of our schools.
So have you experienced in schools much crime?
Very limited crime. And I think one of the things that we've done particularly well, we work with the police force, we work with other services. When you're going into school, for example, maybe in special measures of failing some time, of course you're going to go into a situation where you're going to address poor behaviour. But one of the things that we've done in terms of working with police is we have looked at perhaps the most 20 disadvantaged families. Some of these children may be persistent absence, they may be out on the street, they may be vulnerable. Some of those systems relate to survival on a lot of occasions. And what we've done with these, we've really focused on intervention with particular groups of families, and we made sure that those families understand the consequences of the behaviour. It's very tough love, and we want those children to have the highest aspirations.
So you're saying you have abandoned kids who were potentially committing crime in schools?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Lawrence Taylor, how do you see it?
I think it's really important. You know, there are over 8 million school children and pupils in the country. Crime shouldn't take place in schools. That's a no-brainer. I think it's really important is how do we identify where those schools greatly are, where exists, and how do we prioritise our resources simply on every school in the country. And I think it's important to look at how we work in partnership with schools so that we can intervene early, so we can understand the we have. And for me, I think there's 2 separate issues. We need to understand what the problems are. If we don't understand where we prioritise our resources. What we then do with that, I think, is different. It's a serious crime, of course, we have to deal. But what we don't want to do is penalise people unnecessarily.
You talk about policing schools, because that sounds pretty shocking to parents. Police needing to do that. How does it actually work? How do pupils and their respond? Is it literally a case of police patrol on a day basis?
It varies the country, to be honest. With 43 different forces, we all do things differently. And again, you've seen on your statistics that edit different problems. Sussex, for example, we do have some schools, dedicated clusters of schools, and they work with schools, where police officers who are based in schools. But for me, it's more of a it's building that relationship with young people so that we can address behaviour at an early stage. It's not about using the strong arm of the law on every occasion. And I think as we reform the police service, I think we need a different about schools in dealing with crime.
Can teachers not cope with this alone?
I think that with all our communities, it's about looking at a range of services that would then support particularly. So in Oasis, for example, we run food banks, we breast we make services, so relationships with families. A lot of people look and they I did use that resource provision really slightly, focusing on the families, focusing on the family that need to know those social skills. So a lot of work on mental classes in schools.
And it's such a changing role for schools. Has the nature of the problem is it just that schools are taking on a responsibility that previously they didn't deal with?
I think they've always had that responsibility, but I think there's a much greater sense of prevention strategy. prevent strategy into civilization. So it is actually about working in a more integrated way with social services, etc. Because if involved, family can actually soak up a lot of absorb a lot of different services together.
Lawrence, do you think kids are getting more badly prepared?
No, children are children.
So why the need for police in schools, whether that did happen before?
I think we need to force issues arise. And I say before, it's look at 30,000 crimes, the sort of crimes at the really top end are really rare. You know, we're on talk about quite little stuff. What we need to do is have that relationship with young people. Because if you don't have a relationship, then we could create problems for us in the future. I don't think more deserve it.
Is there a danger, John, of criminalising kids at a day rather than just teaching them right and wrongs in a way that the parents should and hopefully do at home?
I think you're going to get a lot of children mistakes. I think you're going to have a lot of children who've learnt behaviours out on the street. They'll try to bring that into a school context. That's why there has to be absolute consistency. But as an organisation, we consistency make formative because children have different starting points. So you've got to work with those children. They may not look for.
So what stage do you draw the line in a way that is unacceptable from thinking, okay, children from the mistakes, at what stage is a decision taken that actually is a matter for the police?
Well, from we would inform the police and work with the police. It's not about behaviour, it's about having high expectations, but it's about teaching those children they can have a massive consequence for them and for other people in the school community.
The other thing is we shouldn't be frightened having those conversations. You know, I'd hate for a school not to talk to police because there are on TV. I think we tend to in what we do. As I say, you know, children be treated as children for sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes we need to do that. Think about our collective response to address behaviour and how we all weather them first.
School and wardens, it starts to think all teachers, and yet teachers are powerless to chastise. Quality teachers who want to work in such an environment. Anywhere else. Today, several friends and colleagues who were teachers have left the trade because of violence in schools. Does that charge on is something that we feel?
I think that might be a poor school in a failing status, and I think that would harm this whole educational provision very obviously, you know, but it is zero tolerance of poor behaviour in schools. I think all of us, you know, do that.
And the has come away from child, but your top line do you think that's something that should work in any school for any pupil?
I mean, there's a lot so it's about educating the child, it's about working with all the services to make sure that they're and they're on a whole range of different levels.
You see police getting involved in schools. Do you think it should reach people, or potentially is it police and schools are coexisting?
I think we really have, as I say, you know, young people are the people willing in autonomy in fighting time. I think once police the sort of and shouldn't be subjected to violence, and if police that's our responsibility. But I think how we have some ways to work, and certainly in Sussex, you know, we work with our youth commission. to do one thing or the other. I think it's about us evolving together. What's needed.
Lawrence Taylor and John Murphy, thank you. And we've heard from the saying, Mali have no play now. We put you back in charge of the classroom. They can search pupils without consent and use reasonable force to remove disruptive pupils from friends. We have a give head sonic balls. ISIS there that one has said about pupil has committed. Head teachers say it's the right approach for their pupils if incidents occur, and we know many good deal with these and other organisations to educate pupils and protect them from crime. It's very rare for police to be called to schools. Right, so back to the pilgrimage just outside Mecca. 290 people have killed, nearly 400 in invasion of the Wuhan during Pride Muslim Holy City. Mecca from the British Hajj National Charity of Welfare of Groups going to Mecca. Thank you very much for joining us. There has been a rush at Hajj. What's your action? Pictures during this old this morning.
First, with Rwanda in a those have been killed. I think it's a shock. Understand today, Muslims around the world will be marking the sacrificial Eid. This so far, we hear been killed. At the moment, it is very difficult to say how many nationals are affected, though our estimate would be are affected because of the way and the structure the camps are located and we are surely to make hope. And Mina. So yes, there's industry is concerned. However, in one city, don't take place of the incidents. Last year has been considered the number of evidence and internationals that are performing Hajj. Extremely serious. In to make Hajj secure. However, we're not sure exactly what the root cause was. And
the Hajj pilgrimage is very important.
People and this might happen early on, a week to put people off. They will go to fraud. Loss of life is something new, and we're pushing these authorities through our they gives us assurances that Hajj the next couple of days
taken part in the Hajj. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost our connection. Let's go to our correspondent Andy Moore, who has got the
$220 with about 450. Location crash was in the site is there's against three walls in a ritual attempt to try is where there have been incidents in the past. Back in 2006, more than 300 people were killed at this particular location. When a crane collapsed on the ground, and was this incredible event where you have one of the greatest on the planet, more than 2 million people come together. Is the most serious back in 1999 when it was 14 years old when France
Thanks very much, Andy. The charity that uses sport to deal with views, immigration, capital the set up for diversity in Northern Ireland. Let's get live to Belfast. Right. Thanks so much, Joyce. First,
back to the communities in which I came from. Some neighbourhood. Also, my family made me an opportunity to give something. I'm all involved in the charitable pursuits of my football. To be able to own charity allowed me to address issues that affected me in a more focused way.
And why
I'm fortunate to be peace and been for the last 5-6 years with cross-party support. With the grand play and win perms and beats engage with our program.